Welcome to Something to Talk About from the Bainbridge Island Senior Community Center. Happy to have you here. We're going to be talking about living in doom time, and any of us who have opened a newspaper or opened our phone or got a passing glance at the television know that this is a time of great tumult. And if you've been paying attention for any length of time, you also know that there are a lot of indicators about our world that are flashing red. So that's difficult to live with, and that's what we're going to talk about a little bit today. But first, I would like to acknowledge that the indigenous people who have called this place home since time immemorial are the Suquamish people, the people of the clear salt water, who are our neighbors. And it was their land that we are now inhabiting on Bainbridge Island. So we owe them an apology and some gratitude, and we hope to learn from them how to be better stewards of our lands and waters. Also, I want to thank Fieldstone Communities of Bainbridge Island because nonprofits depend on support from people like you and from sponsors like Fieldstone. Fieldstone offers independent living, assisted living, and memory care up on Rolling Bay. They have a lovely campus. You can go see the beautiful work they've done on the former Messenger House campus, and they are happy to give you a tour. Call 206-594-1010. Celia or Jamie will be glad to help you take a look around, and they'd be glad to offer you a free lunch or dinner. FieldstoneCommunities.com. So I got inspired not only by the idea that, just the idea that we're all living through a lot of confusion and panic and uncertainty about what the next day might bring. But of course, there's been this low-grade sense of uncertainty for a while. And I'm a member of a congregation that is reading Life After Doom by Brian McLaren right now. And I thought, wow, this guy has got some ideas about how to confront the challenges that we are facing. And you know, the idea is not that we can solve the problems. It's first off to admit that we can't, that what we're going to do is have to live in what I think he calls a very bumpy road. He outlined a series of expectations about what might happen, and I have them here. He he said there are like four possible scenarios. Well, there are three possible scenarios and one impossible scenario. The possible scenarios from worst to best are collapse and extinction, basically the end of any existence as we know it, based on the fact that we're overshooting our use of the ecology. We're paying no attention to the effects on the climate. We're focused more on economic prosperity for some and inequality for all. And that if you continue on the same pace in the same direction, all the signs point to an absolute disaster for life as we know it. Now, life as we don't know it, we won't know because we won't be here. The next not as bad scenario, I guess, for humans is collapse survival, which is, I think of it a little bit like the Mad Max movies, that societies collapse and there are just a few sort of people trying to hold it together, and there's a lot of tribalism. Maybe we will learn from the disaster, and these new surviving societies would be able to live in a more ecologically friendly way. But it's not anything like what we know now. Collapse and rebirth. This is a scenario where we see things fall apart and we start to do our best to recover and rebuild societies and economies in new ways. And then the fourth scenario is collapse avoidance. And Brian basically says he thinks that's off the table, that we are unlikely to be able to quickly have governments, businesses, and citizens unite to stabilize our climate crisis before it starts to collapse things. So that's pretty dark. But what Brian says is that he thinks that that it's also reality, and that there is some value in, the only value really, in looking at things as they are. And if we do that, well, one, we're more likely to hit one of the rebirth scenarios rather than complete collapse. It's really the only way. Also, if we're denying what's going to happen, if we don't look at reality, it will have an effect on us. We will be torn up inside. And so making connection and facing the world as it is, he says, is the best thing that we can do for ourselves and for others. So what I'd like to do, I would like to share a little bit of a video from a woman named Nadine Andrews from the Climate Psychology Alliance, and she talks about the value of sharing our experiences with each other and why it's important to do that. So if you'll allow me, I will share my screen. Let's see, is this share? That's not what you want to look at. This is it. Okay, here we go.
In terms of what we've found can be quite useful messages for people who are struggling with this is knowing that it's normal and common to feel these kind of emotions, because for many people it's a feeling that they're alone with these emotions, that that no one else feels like this, like they do, or they can't talk to other people about it. But actually, as we know from the research, that's not the case at all. In fact, most people are feeling like this. The second thing is that feeling these emotions can be viewed positively as a sign that you're actually connected with the reality of the crisis. You know, that is a good thing. For people who are not feeling any of those emotions, I would be more concerned about them, actually, because that shows that, you know, there's some kind of dissociation going on, or denial. It's important to be checking in with yourself. You know, how are you feeling right now? You know, I'm sure you're all aware about the issues around burnout, but being able to kind of recognize how you are feeling and to just accept that what you're feeling right now is how you're feeling. Taking a breathing space if that's what's needed, and it might be, you know, that sometimes you do need to just take a step back in order to not burn yourself out. You know, again, it's this issue of how much time you take when you step back. If that becomes a permanent state, then that's not adaptive, but it can be useful for all of us at times to just not watch the news or not read another article. And then also to remember that you can only do what you can individually and with others. Keeping a sense of perspective around all of this. So yes, all of us do have responsibility, but it's not all on you. And as I said before about talking with others who will understand and will just listen and not judge you. So the final point I want to make is that in acknowledging the conflicts and tensions within us, including these different emotions, so both positive emotions and these other more difficult emotions, that these can reside within us at the same time. So we can feel both hopeful and sad, you know, angry and excited. And we also all face ethical dilemmas around this. None of us are perfect. Nobody's got a completely adaptive response to this. And there will be moments when some of us, when we'll all to some extent be in denial about stuff because it is scary. So it's, yeah, the main issue here is that none of us are completely right or wrong. in the way that we're responding. And so rather than falling into a kind of us and them, which can happen, where everybody else is kind of the problem, when we realize that all of us are struggling with this, then that brings a kind of humility, and that can help us to relate to each other with more compassion and forgiveness.
Okay. I'm wondering if anybody has any thoughts about what Nadine was saying.
I think
How are
those
you
are all very valid considerations. I would add to that the stages of death and dying, of avoidance, of anger, of grief. Those are real emotions, personal emotions and community emotions that we may need help dealing with. Grief counseling.
I think that one of the things that Brian mentions is that he talks about comparing this to the grieving of his parents' death. And he said, this is going to make me choke up a little bit, but he said that one of the things that nobody had told him when they were talking about what it's like to grieve is that it is bittersweet, that there are also sweet moments of recognition of the beauty that is gone. Mm-hmm. Think of Joni Mitchell's Taxi. We don't know what we've got till it's gone. And that we do ourselves and our world a disservice to not grieve with some sweetness about the things that we recognize are leaving, are going away. Mm-hmm. He shares a story about going to a place where he used to play in the woods on Rock Creek Park that is now all paved over or planted over and is basically a picnic spot and doesn't look at all like the wild place that he used to find salamanders and turtles. And we're going to see more of that, or see less of what we used to see, and recognizing that without denying it is, I think, really important. So grieving, for sure, recognizing that we're grieving the world that is disappearing, and that we can also do what we can to recognize what it is that we can do, which is different for every person. And I think that one of the things that Brian mentions at the very end of his book is the idea that whatever you do, everything matters. Mm-hmm. So, voicing your concern, being willing to say, I'm worried about what's going to happen, or I'm worried about ecological overshoot, makes it something that we can talk about, that we're a little afraid to talk about. Being curious and recognize that you don't have the answers, and that requires critical thinking. Mm-hmm. And a sense that you don't know everything, and your idea about what it is might be wrong or might be incomplete, and that kind of humility is required if we're going to move forward. And that you can't, even though you can't contribute every day, every way, because you're a human, what you do every day, whatever you do, helps. And, Nadine mentioned this. If people call you a hypocrite, it's like, yeah, we're all hypocritical because we're connected to the ways of living in this world that we've been raised with. And we depend on things like, cars to get around, and maybe we dry our laundry in the dryer. And maybe we, and we, I don't know, you might have a IRA or a retirement account or a pension that is invested in something that you wouldn't invest in yourself, but you're not perfect. You're doing the best you can and allow that to be what you can. Lena, I see your hand is up. Would you like to unmute?
Yes. Sorry. Hi guys. I just wanted to comment a little bit. Thank you, Reed. I just wanted to comment a little bit. That was a really cool little clip you just played with the chart. And the one thing I really liked about it is it really validates what I was feeling as I'm reading it and listening to the speaker on that little clip. It validated a lot of emotions that I'm sure some people, it helps them to deal with all the scariness we're living through right now. And that was really comforting in a weird way to see that and hear her talk about that. But it also let me feel like I'm not alone in the fear, and also to remind me that what what I'm feeling is temporary, almost like when I have to deal with anxiety, this too shall pass. It's just learning how to ride the wave through the dark and the light, basically the light, the wave of life. But one thing that I'm talking with, stepping back about all these various different things we're all trying to navigate in life is with my own family members to break it down into bite-sized pieces of what we can handle during each and every day is because people are struggling so much, whether it's emotionally, mentally, financially, physically, whatever the case may be, to let them know that it is okay to ask for help out there. There are services out there and programs. Helpline House is amazing. Fishland, all these wonderful services that are there for people, but there's always been kind of a shameful stigma that's attached to that. And people are afraid to ask for help or for whatever feelings, but I just are trying to tell my circle of people to try to put that shame to the side because we're here to help people. They're here to help us. Some of us are stronger on some days than others and vice versa. I might need help one day. So, when you run into somebody at Helpline or wherever, and you, from what I've seen is sometimes you see the head down and the eyes down and they seem embarrassed, but to try to make that moment non-embarrassing for them, like, hey, we're in this together, and how are you doing? And give them a smile or whatever. But that's kind of the pieces I've been taken about from that one slide clip you just showed. I just wanted to share that. That's kind of the reaction.
I feel like that. I know that you've helped with Barbara Akota's efforts to have a Women of Bisque program here on a regular basis. And that we have a number of different formal and informal support groups here. And I feel like and we've done climate cafes. Rick and Don have headed up climate cafes, and we'll do that again. But taking advantage of the idea of being able to check in with other people and hear what they're doing and support them in what they're doing. And recognize that we're not all going to do the same thing. Like, I don't know whether because of the weather she was able to go, but I was talking with Kimi Kinoshita yesterday, and she was going to go down to a rally in Olympia today. And there are people who have been going to try to visit our senators' offices in Seattle. Maybe that's not something you can do. Maybe sending an email or maybe talking to somebody just on the island. All of those things help. And, so think about what you can do today. The other thing that Brian mentioned, we've said a couple times, the idea of stepping away, breathing, not stepping totally away. But one of the things that I think I've noticed is increasingly the case is that the ugly news is really addictive. It's like I have to keep going back and see what disaster is being promulgated in this 15-minute period. You don't need to do that. I mean, you can say to yourself, I'm going to be on a news diet. I'm not going to check out, but I'm going to give myself, I'm going to try to limit my exposure because a lot of it is is, as the young people say, it's whack.
Well, and having been in radio, may I share with you that the media loves sensational items because that's what sells the advertisements.
Well,
And
that's
so
what
the
gets
more
our attention.
you know, it gets your attention. And I have a neighbor who has the TV or the radio on in his ear 24/7. He is so depressed and so negative. I said, Alan, you need to give yourself a break, you know? The other thing is that I'm working very hard to do is to look for the divinity in every human being. Even if they shout at me, if I say something, I have an idea, and they shout how wrong I am and what have you, then I seek first to understand their point of view, and then for them to understand my point of view, if they're still there wanting to hear my point of view. So it is a challenge, and there is, you know, some negative thought, and how do we get beyond it? And my feeling is one day at a time.
John.
It occurs to me that dealing with these impossible situations is a lot like dealing with a chronic disease. That if you have been diagnosed with cancer or with Crohn's disease, that you deal with the symptoms, you keep aware of what treatments are necessary, you keep your doctor's appointments, you take the medication, but beyond that, there's not a whole lot you can do. And so you do what you can, and then you keep on keeping on. And find support groups with people who have similar situations. Sometimes the best way to deal with a problem is to help somebody else. And I know the senior center is a wonderful place to go for support, as is IVC and communities of faith. Some neighborhoods have support groups within themselves. Our little subdivision, we have several friends that are great to just talk to. And other people have talked about how tough it is to pick up the phone to talk to somebody, but that's something we're going to have to get more used to, because we're dealing with a chronic disease. Our planet is diseased, and there are some who would say our political structure is also diseased. So what can we do? What do we have control over, and what do we not have control over? So
Yeah.
that's my 2 cents.
Oh, I think I'll give you a quarter for that. Yeah, I think that the other thing that was sort of hinted at there is beauty, is the idea of consciously trying to turn your head away from only the ugly and only the disaster. And I imagine this is also true when you're living with a chronic and potentially terminal disease, is the idea of seeking out what's sweet and beautiful about being alive, and trying to capture that in your heart so that you have something that's lifting you up, that there is, I think Lena was talking about light, that there is light in your world too, because otherwise it's sort of like it doesn't matter. And there is a strain of fundamentalist disaster apocalyptic Christianity that believes that this is all a thing to be used up, and that it's all just a playground for the end of the world, and you don't need to worry, because the point is for those who are rescued to be raptured and disappear, and so the planet doesn't really matter. Well, I think that that's mistaken. And I think that we need to remember to love the planet we have and do what we can to help. Yes, John, again.
I think to that end, looking at life, one of the purposes of life is to live. and to procreate. And when you say that to wait for the rapture, wait for the end, that's contradictory to that purpose of life, which is to continue living and to raise the next generation and the generation after that. So I think one of our key goals is to help our children and our grandchildren and to give them comfort as they're going through changing times and help them have perspective of how much is enough and what's important.
And let them know that there are other people who are as concerned as they are and we are about the situation, that they're not alone.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of messaging of, a lot of our culture and economy, et cetera, is all focused on growth. And we're going to need to learn a way that isn't so dependent on continuing to exploit natural resources to fuel increasing growth of economies to the detriment of the planet. And so that kind of comfort for each other, I think, as we're working on this is, as we've said over and over again, important. Sheila.
Yeah, I think that, well, I know I have 1,000 things that keep going through my mind. As one person says something, I say, yeah, and yeah. And I'm reading the book too, so, and it's really extraordinary as all McLaren's stuff is. He comes down with love, basically. And I adore Brian McLaren. I think the one thing that you were just talking about is, John, you're talking about children and grandchildren. I look forward to my almost weekly telephone call from my grandson who lives down now in San Diego. Even when he lived up in Seattle, he would call me almost weekly. And, checking in with the old lady, how's she doing? And but the idea that, as I mentioned to him just yesterday, day before yesterday, I guess it was, when he called, because he wants me to come down there and see his digs and go to a ball game, because the Mariners are going to be there with the Padres. So that's all set. And the things that he's looking forward to, and he's loving his job. And then we get into the stuff that's going on in Washington, D.C. But very quickly, we turn around and come back to, well, what are we going to do when? And where are we going to go? And what beach are you going to? And can I go to the zoo, please? That kind of thing. And we always tend to end up, both he and Mackenzie, end up with a positive at the end of our conversation. And because if it's all fear, we get stymied. We're just not going to move anywhere. But with these two, anyway, the joy and the excitement of living, they're having a wonderful time of it. And they're in love. By golly, they're both in love with these lovely people. I'm so thrilled for them,
Yeah.
That's great. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's great. And I do feel like holding both things is really important. The idea that we're not denying or ignoring reality, that avoiding that is also very injurious. I have a little quote from Brian's book at the end of his book that I was going to read as a closing out idea, and I'll just ask if there's anything anybody wants to add before we do that. So he's talking about the options of where we are, and saying that a community of resilience matters. And we just mentioned, John, you just mentioned organizations like Island Volunteer Caregivers, which can help with respite, or places like the Senior Community Center or Communities of Faith. Those are all certainly part of that. And he also adds, whatever happens to civilization as we know it, you and I can find and do what is ours to do right now and shine as magnificently as we can right now, each year that we're given, each day we're awake, each breath that we take. We don't need to know the plan in advance. We just need to walk our path. In the walking, step by step, the way will unfold like tendrils reaching out from a billion branches, seeking light. The ultimate destination, that is beyond both our control and our capacity to know. So here we are, savoring this gift of this day, in this life, in these times, waking up in the unfolding mystery, the gift, and that is gift enough here and now. And I think there's a lot of wisdom in the idea that that is gift enough here and now. It doesn't mean that we're off the hook, but it means that we are not required to know how the story ends, because it's impossible. So
Reed,
I'm
Reed, I
happy
think
to-
that's worth reading again. Would you mind
okay, I'll give it
reading
one
that
more
again?
shot. Whatever happens to civilization as we know it, you and I can find and do what is ours to do right now and shine as magnificently as we can right now, each year that we're given, each day that we're awake, each breath that we take. We don't need to know the plan in advance. We just need to walk our path. In the walking, step by step, the way will unfold like tendrils reaching out from a billion branches seeking light. The ultimate destination, that is beyond both our control and our capacity to know. So here we are, savoring this gift of this day, in this life, in these times, waking up in the unfolding mystery, and that is gift enough here and now. Brian McLaren's book is Life After Doom, and Sheila is going to put it up there on the screen for you to see. Wisdom and Courage for a World Falling Apart. Thank you all, and I'm happy to have another discussion like this in the future. But I just thought the way the last couple of weeks have gone, it made sense to take a breath and get together and have this discussion. So be well.
Very good.